When I was on the market to dip my toes into the narwhal's waters, it just happened that the second version of Peter Draws was announced, and since it had a smoky, transparent color with white ribbons, something that I like as a color combo, I thought, why not? And as such, I ordered my first Narwhal original fountain pen. This was before they changed their name. The number that I have on this limited version, if anyone cares, it's number 594 out of 1080. Anyway, getting into the fountain pen as mentioned, the number that I have it's 594 out of 1080 copies. However, if you're not buying a Peter Draws fountain pen, this will be exactly the same. The only difference is that you won't have a number stamped up there. You're just gonna have either a silver or a gold trim that it's plain as far as I've seen. I don't think that changed over time. And this pen has a really nice cap. The clip on it, it's actually pretty good. I like it. I'll get back to it. And again, cap tapers up to a band, and then it's a step down. On the band, it says Narwhal, and that's inscripted twice. Then the piston barrel, which is usually straight in order to accommodate for that piston working up and down and making sure it's straight. Another ring, a knob that slowly tapers and then ends into a dumb end. Now, going back to the clip it's actually functional, works pretty well, opens up quite nicely and doesn't seem to be stamped, seems to be made out of one piece, that it seems to be riveted on L bracket, and that's where the springiness comes from. One wish that I had with this pen, if they would have went just a little bit longer on this side, they could have made it a nice rocker clip, but that's okay, it still works as intended, I would say. On my copy, there's a little bit of side movement, barely perceivable, you only feel it when you lift the clip. And doing a shirt test, actually slides over the cloth very nicely, not an issue. This is what you see out of your shirt if you keep it in your shirt. And it comes out actually just as nice and smooth, no issues. Nice clip, very simple, very elegant. Fingerprint magnet, that's why I keep on cleaning it. And the cap, it's a twist cap. Opens up pretty nicely. I think when I counted it, it was just under 2 turns. Threads are very smooth, very nice and clean, and polished actually. They were very nice, I like. And actually the cap secures in place very nice. You don't have to turn it too tight in order to stay there securely. It won't open up on you. And when you remove the cap, not that you are not able to see through the cap, but when you remove the cap, you will reveal a fairly short section that flares out a little bit just before the nib. In my case, I'm having a Kaijelu, or I'm not sure, hopefully I said it right, Kaijelu number 6 nib. I replaced the original nib because that fine for me was more of a medium. As an additional mention, the nib on my fountain pen, even the original nib, one was placed in the proper position with the feed. It had an issue where the tines were split, and this was happening only when the nib was on the pen. If I would have removed the nib, the tines were perfectly aligned, no split between them. As such, I realized that the feed, for whatever reason, was not very compatible with this pen. I don't blame it on the pen. These are the generic feeds that will come on a lot of fountain pens, and maybe there was something defective with the feed. Needless to say, I had to heat set the feed with the nib in order to work properly. And now I have no split between the tines. And at this point I usually show the inside of the cap, but I don't think there's no need. Everything is pretty much visible from the outside. There is an inner plastic leaf to protect the screw that is down there at the bottom, and then there's a lip inside here that it's actually part of the cap, is not a plastic insert. And on my copy it almost meets with the section. The section doesn't push on that part of the pen. It actually stops at the band, and that's where it secures in place. As a fun fact, the thread, it's a two-head start thread pattern on this. So basically you can actually have two positions. You'll have your nib either on opposite from your clip or aligned with your clip. In my case, they're not 100% aligned. It's slightly misaligned. But to be honest, that doesn't bother me that much, because on my copy, if I align it on the other side, it's almost like a window between those ribbons where you can actually see the nib, and I actually much prefer of that. Speaking of that, what do you like on a transparent pen? When your nib it aligns opposite to the clip, or when your nib aligns when it's under the clip? I'm just curious to see what preferences people have. Going back to the body of the pen, as mentioned, the section is fairly short. However, the way it continues with the barrel, there are some step-ups at the threads and at the band just before the piston. However, these steps are gradual, they're not abrupt, and as such I don't really feel them. I don't find them annoying, and I can easily move my fingers up and down on the body of the pen. As a matter of fact, I actually like those threads because it helps with adding more grip to your hand and making sure you hold it securely. Not that the body is very slippery, but I guess if your hands tends to be a little bit maybe more oily, it might be a little bit slippery. On my copy, the ribbons ends just shortly above basically the beginning of the barrel, which I kind of like because it kind of gives this feeling that the piston goes into those ribbons as you put it down. And speaking of the piston works very nice. There is no actual lock mechanism on the piston knob, but this thing slides very nice and very smooth. One thing to note is that the piston doesn't go all the way down, so you will always have an air gap. You can definitely fill up the piston with this as well, all the way, as in having no air gap, but it will take 2 tries and you have to fiddle a little bit with it. One thing to mention, I don't remember that when I got a piston, if I worked on it. I might have. I'm not sure if all of them have the piston going all the way up. Usually, as far as I know, they don't. They have like a small gap, and that what makes me think that I might have worked on this. I had the pen for a while, and I'll be honest, I forgot if I worked on it or not. I usually tend to modify it just to gain a little bit more ink space by moving that, making sure it's all the way up. And obviously, speaking of that, the piston is serviceable with the right wrench, which usually is included with the fountain pen, which is very nice. The only thing to note, because of the plating that they did there, you'll have to fiddle a little bit with the wrench to make it to make sure it goes over those 2 flat ends, but it's not really that much of a pain. It's a little bit of a fiddle, but works. There is a little bit of play in the piston knob. So be careful with that, don't just crank it. Since these are plastic parts, if you shock them too much, eventually they will break. So just go slowly until you feel it engaging, and then just go all the way and drive that piston up or down as needed. In hand, the pen actually feels very nice. I like it. I like its weight. I like how it feels. It feels robust, and it feels that the walls of this pen are thick and sturdy. At least that's the feeling that it gives. And based on how those ribbons are cut up and the cross section that you see, I think they're nice. They have a decent thickness to their wall. This is not removable. I forgot to mention this. This seems to be glued in place. Also, I tried to remove the nib and feet by twisting the nib unit. It seems to be like there is a nib unit. I don't know if it's glued in place. I was not able to remove this. I even tried to soak the pen in water and leave it in water for a while. Hopefully the water would have crept in and helped with loosening those threads. I was still not able to do that. I didn't force it. I didn't want to force it, so I just usually remove the nib and feet by pulling it out and cleaning it that way if needed. The fountain pen feels very nice in hand. I like its balance. As mentioned, I do like how it looks, and I like the sturdiness that it has. And it feels solid, and it feels like those walls are pretty thick, and something that will definitely last you a long time. No complaints in that regard. And balance in hand, it is a little bit top heavy because of that metal piece on the piston knob, not piston knob, on the piston mechanism. But I don't find it that uncomfortable when I actually hold it in hand. I don't even feel that it is top heavy. It feels well balanced. And if by any chance this pen is not lengthy enough for you, the pen that post, unfortunately though, it makes the pen quite top heavy. The balance shifts quite a lot, almost basically just under the cap. And for that, it does make it top heavy. If you have smaller hands than mine, you'll definitely feel that that top weight, and you feel like you're fighting against something. Basically, to basically hold it comfortable, I will have to hold it maybe somewhere in here. Might work for drawing and loose sketching, but for writing, if you don't like top heavy pens, you won't like this. Personally, I don't like it posted either. I usually use it posted only when I do loose sketches. Another downside of this is because the knob doesn't have a lock mechanism, and because the cap posts right on the knob doesn't go any deeper than that, you could easily accidentally move the piston up and down, and as such you might have an accident. And in the end, this is the fountain pen. This narwhal, it's actually pretty nice, pretty fun. I used it before. I had it for a while, and it's a nice piston filler. As other reviewers have mentioned before and demonstrated, this is pretty much like a standard piston filler mechanism that you find on a lot of Chinese made fountain pens. Nothing wrong with it, works brilliantly, and I never had any issues with that plunger getting stuck inside the barrel. So compared with other piston fillers, is definitely a better one. Alright, so this is the fountain pen. Let me go fill it up, and then I'll come back with a writing test, and hopefully we'll have a nice drawing with this pen as well. I will be working only with this nib. I'm not gonna switch to the original one. All I can tell you is that nib works just fine. Absolutely not an issue with it. It's just I prefer the final line on this nib. For today's ink, I am using Platinum Carbon ink. I mean, it is a Peter Draws fountain pen. I have to use black ink, and it has to be platinum carbon ink. So this is Narwhal original. Peter Draws. Fountain pen. Looks like tonight it's one of the nights when I cannot spell. And this is a Kaijalu extra fine nib. Now this nib is actually pretty dense. I like it. I tend to like Kaijalu nibs quite a lot. They're very decent nibs and excellent for drawing from my experience. This is a very extra fine line when you barely glide over the paper, which should help me with a lot of details. However, it runs a little bit dry. And then the reverse works nicely as well. Almost just as fine, if not even finer, but drier. However, if I push a little bit, seems to work, but again, dry. And quite wet if I use it and push more normally. Alright, pen works fine. This nib has no issue. It works as it should, and I'm hoping to get a nice sketch with it. From this nib you can get a little bit of line variation. I wouldn't call it a flex or a semi-flex. This is what I would call a fun nib. You need to press a little bit too hard to get that line difference. Pay attention to that. You don't want to spline your tines too much and bend your nib. However, you can definitely have some fun with it if you really want to, and the flow is pretty decent. Alright, with that aside, let me go and try and do a sketch of this thing. Hopefully it will turn out okay, and I'll let you know my final thoughts on the fountain pen. Today's drawing turned out to be another beautiful mess. Well, in my opinion at least. Do I say that for every drawing that I have? Maybe I need to find another line. It started as something and ended up as, well, something else. I think the closest thing that I can think of, some sort of flower. What flower, you ask? Well, I'll let you guess, because I for one have no clue. Anyway, the fountain pen worked out beautiful, and on this Fabriano paper I had absolutely no issues with a nib or anything or any kind of issue, to be honest. And I realized that I almost ran out of ink because, well, I was not able to get a full fill to begin with. I guess soon I will be needing a new bottle of this platinum black goodness. Speaking of ink, towards the end of the drawing I also decided to enlist the help of two other fountain pens, since I had other ink colors in them and wanted to bring a little bit of splash of life into this drawing. The fountain pens that I use were the Wingsung 629 that I previously reviewed, and I had Hiroshizuku Yamabudo in it. And the other one, it's another bespoke fountain pen that I haven't presented yet, and I hope I will get a chance to show it off soon. Anyway, what do I like about the Narwhal original? The thing that stands the most to me, it's how it actually feels in hand. Good high quality acrylic or resin, I'm not sure what it is. well polished and definitely well finished. I also really like the smoky transparent color that it has with the white ribbons. I think, at least for me, based on my likings, this version stands out the most when I compare it with the other colors in the same kind of a theme that they have. Other things very pleasant to use, especially unposted, has a decent balance as well. Well, unposted. Piston works very well without any issues and it's serviceable, something that is very nice. And another thing that was nice of them to add and include was the spanner for the piston. Hard to dislike the fountain pen, and there is a reason why it's so loved and cherished by a lot of people. What I don't like about it. On my copy, there are a few things that were not ideal, but I was able to either fix or, for me at least, are not really a big deal. I guess the only big issue that I had was with the nib and the feed and how the tines were split apart. And as such, it was giving me a wider line than what I was expecting. Even with the original nib that they have, it had the same issue. However, after setting the feed with the nib using a heat gun, everything was perfect as it can be. Not a biggie for me really, but I guess something to be aware of. I don't really blame it on the quality of the pen because, well, these feeds are very generic and I mean, they're mass produced and mass used, and some, I guess, they do have issues. If anything, if it's anything to blame on Narwhal, maybe it was just the quality control, but in the end, again, not a biggie, I would say. The other thing that might be an issue, it's the side-to-side movement on the clip. Very minor on my copy, but present. And since I don't really care about clips or really use them as well they are intended to me it's a non-issue. However, for someone that is using the clip a lot, and if there's wiggle into it, eventually over time it might become a problem. So again, something I guess to be aware of. Overall, I love the fountain pen. I find it very comfortable, and I think that the nib it comes with, it's a very nice nib and very smooth. The only reason I changed the nib is because I didn't want to buy another Narwhal nib, and I already had these Kaigelu extra fines that I do like. So in the end, like I mentioned, I love the fountain pen. I definitely recommend it. And again, there's a definitely I see the reason behind as to why a lot of people love these pens. And I guess this will be another wrap. And if you have any other questions, please do leave a comment below and I will try and get to it as soon as I can. Thank you for joining me today, and I hope I'll see you next time. I wish you all the best and a wonderful day or night, wherever you are. Take care. Bye.